Hello, everyone. I'm Leah Toms from the marketing team, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar where we'll explain the importance of choosing a reputable CA in preparation for 47-day TLS. I have Tim Callan, Chief Compliance Officer, and Nick France, Chief Technology Officer, here for you today. This presentation is being recorded and we'll share it with you afterwards, most likely tomorrow. And finally, if you have any questions during the presentation, send them over. Please use the Q&A function and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. Nick and Tim, let's get started.
Hey Nick, how you doing?
I'm good, Tim. Thanks. And how are you?
Good, I'm good. So here's the agenda that we want to cover today. First of all, we've been trying to communicate to the market there's an important shift coming, which is that the maximum term for TLS certificates is going to go down in stages until about 3.5 years from now. It's going to hit 47 days as a maximum term for a certificate. And just because a lot of subscribers don't live this the way we do, you may not necessarily be aware. So the first thing is just for everybody to be aware what's going on, what's happening, what it looks like. And then the consequences of that, right? We'll talk about what that means in terms of potential risk for you and potential consequences, and how your CA, the rest of this is how your CA is an important partner in ensuring that this is a smooth transition that doesn't result in outages or other problems. So that's what we're going to run through in these 5 steps. Yes, Nick?
Yes, that's it, Tim. Yep. I'll give
Okay.
everybody the rundown and then we'll go
Okay.
into more of the details.
So, what do you need to know about the shift to 47-day certificate lifespans? So, just at a high level, it's important to understand that there is a big macro trend in the world of public certificates and also in real world implementations of private certificates, which is that certificate lifespans are getting shorter. And to put things in perspective, back before the baseline requirements, we saw certificates out there in the world. People would get 10-year certificates. This was really a thing. The BRs knocked it down to 5, and then from there it has stepped down over time until our current 1-year maximum term, with a trend to move on even lower. And the other thing to understand connected to this is this isn't just SSL certificates. That's the thing we tend to talk about the most because that's the one that's used the most, but we've seen the same thing with other certificate types too. Code signing and SMIME certificates have been getting shorter in term. Code signing certs have another reduction in term that's probably on the way, and just general, everything's getting shorter. Now, what this means in terms of the timeline for certificate lifespans is we first heard about this in 2023 when Chrome kind of threw down a gauntlet to say, we want to see everything get down to 90 days. And that led to 2 years of discussion in a number of different places about how to do this and what to do and what it should look like, ending in a CA browser forum ballot in April of 2025. That's a ballot that was proposed by Apple and sponsored by ourselves and a couple other root store programs that created a step down, as I said, eventually to 47 days. And this is what it looks like. This is the reduction in term for all of the things that are going to step down. And probably let's focus first on this left column, right? So certificate term. This is the maximum term of a public TLS server certificate, right? What we normally call an SSL certificate. And as you can see here today, it's 13 months, 398 days, which is, think of that as a year plus a little bit of extra. And the extra is in case we have an early renewal we want to perform, or let's say there's some kind of technical problem and our cert doesn't swap out when it's supposed to, and we have to go in and manually fix that. All of that little extra kind of prevents that from being an outage scenario. So right now we're at 1 year and a little extra. March 15, 2026, that'll go to 200 days. 200 days is 6 months plus a little extra. So it allows you to do the same thing. And the vision is that we're going to get on a 6-month cadence at this point. March 15, 2027, exactly 1 year later, we go down to 100 days. 100 days is 3 months plus a little extra. So in that kind of time frame, you can imagine that you're every 3 months, once a quarter, you're renewing these certificates. And then finally, March 15, 2029, 2 years after that, you see 47 days. 47 days, of course, is 1 month plus a little extra. So imagine in that kind of time frame that every month your certificate is renewing, maybe on the same day, maybe it's on the 12th of the month, or maybe it's, second Tuesday, or however you've got that working, that you're on a regular 1 month cadence where these things are cycling out. So that, that's the step down on the certs, right, Nick?
Yep, and it's important to know, obviously, we were just talking before we started this webinar, Tim, right? Is, 200 days, the first step down, which is basically half of what we have today, is not
Yeah,
that many months away.
it is
So
not far
200
away.
days starts on March 15th, 2026. That's the first big step down.
Right.
It's 6 months. Is it super painful for everybody? Maybe for some, maybe not. It's a good motivator to get everybody to step in the right direction and start automating.
Yeah. And if nothing else, if you do nothing else, it's going to be twice the work. So that right there might be motivational. I think
Absolutely.
it's the idea is for this step down to give us a chance to kind of phase it in. So if there's some of our systems that we can't have automated by March 15, we can live with those every 6 months. But hopefully a lot of that workload gets taken away by automation. And then a year after that, got some you still have to do once a quarter. You can do that too, because hopefully a lot of the remainder have been taken away by automation. That's kind of the idea, right? Is that the total number of certs you're dealing with goes down at every stage because a lot of them get taken care of by automation. And therefore, labor wise, we're still able to manage it. Nick, do you want to explain the DCV thing?
Yeah, sure. So I think, as we've said when we've done these kind of discussions before, Tim, that second column, the DCV use period, is a bit of the lead that was buried in all of this in the ballot and Google's original proposal. So this is the amount of time that a domain verification can be reused. So whenever anybody that's listening to this, whenever you go and get a certificate, a TLS certificate, you have to prove you control any and all domain names that get signed into that certificate. So I have to prove I own nickfrance.com in order to get a certificate for it. And we as a CA can allow you as a subscriber to do that action one time, and we can reuse that action for a period of time. So for our enterprise customers today, you do that domain validation proof and you can use it for 398 days. You don't have to do it again. But as you can see in that column, Tim, that time period is being reduced as well, mostly in step with the reduction in certificate lifetime until you get to that March 15, 2029 date where it goes down to 10 days. What does this mean? The key thing this means is that the action that you currently perform once a year, like certificates, which within your domain control, you're going to have to do much more frequently. You are going to have to automate. You are going to have to do it at least once a week by the time we get to 2029. And I think you and I are in some level of agreement that it might not be too long after that before it's happening even more frequently, perhaps daily, perhaps with every certificate issuance. But this is where your PKI teams are going to have to get very friendly with your DNS teams, because the domain control validation is really, it's a DNS process. So you're going to have to start looking to how you can automate and work with the DNS teams to automate this process as well as the certificate process.
And Nick, what's the value of the DCV reuse step down? Why is this in here?
Yeah, well, it's much the same as we said, shorter is better. I think we get onto in a minute about with certificate lifetime. But if you think about the two dates that we've got at the top of this table here, so 398 days, you could use a domain validation for up to 398 days. And on the 398th day, you could issue a 398-day certificate, which is essentially meaning that that single action to prove someone controls a DNS record, which, as we all know, can change in seconds, that can then be valid for up to 2 years or way over 2 years. That's a crazy amount of time for that single action to be valid and to be, relied upon by billions of people.
I might have given up control of the domain. I might have given up control of the domain the day after I did that DCV, right? And now 2 years later, I still have a valid cert. Yeah,
absolutely.
Agreed.
So it does pose a risk, and that's why it's coming down.
Yep. And then the rightmost column is just other organization validation information. So this is information about if you're using an OV or an EV cert, about what your organization is. We check out your company and your location and your right to get the cert and all of that stuff. And that's part of the OV EV standard. Right now, that can be used for 2 years. We don't at Sectigo. We do it every year, but that can be used for 2 years by the rules. That's going to come down to 366 days. And it looks like it's going to stay there for the foreseeable future. This is because organization validation is a little heavier and because organizations just don't change as quickly.
No,
So,
it
yeah,
doesn't change as quickly. It could be, I mean, absolute worst case, I think that sort of data might change annually, or if a company changes their entire headquarters, it's certainly not like a DNS record, which might
right.
actually change every second. So yeah,
Correct.
it's
Yeah.
about the heavy lift there. But for OV and EV certificates, that process we go through to verify your company details, verify somebody there, that's only still going to happen, once a year. And that's really as a highlight so that people who use OV and EV certificates, they aren't going to have to do that business validation every 10 days in the future.
Yep. And to be clear on the DCV reuse period, because we've gotten this question in the past, that once an individual cert has undergone DCV does not need to occur for that certificate ever again. So even when we're down to 10-day DCV with 47-day certs, that doesn't mean that you're going to have to re-DCV your certs 4 times over the course of their lifespan, right? If I get a cert on day 1 and I do DCV, that cert is good for 47 days. I don't have to go back and redo DCV for that cert. It's just if I'm going to get another certificate for that same domain and I'm going to get it more than 10 days later, then I need to redo domain control validation at that time. Right?
Exactly, Tim. Yeah, it's a
That's the
process that has to
point.
happen before a certificate is issued, not repeatedly afterwards for that same
Yeah.
certificate. Yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah. So shorter certificates, I mean, you already hinted at this, Nick. Like in general, why are certificate lifespans being reduced? Really, the most basic reason is because they're safer.
Yep. Shorter is
Yeah.
better
Yep.
when it
Like
comes to security things.
let's say your private key got exposed and you didn't know it, or let's say that certificate someone spoofed a subdomain of yours and managed to get a certificate issued for a subdomain that they control that you should control, right? These are two very realistic scenarios. Let's say a border gateway protocol attack occurs. Under these circumstances, the shorter the lifespan of the certificate, the less time that you have, or the bad guy has to exploit it, right? The less exposure you have. So shorter is better, and then that gets balanced against the fact that stuff's got to operate. We're not going to make them 1 minute certificates because things have to work. And this is where we come up with the dates we come up with. Another one though is crypto agility. So
Yeah.
the big kind of wake up call on this was with the deprecation of SHA-1. So the community had decided that SHA-1 was not considered to be a secure, usable hashing algorithm anymore. And so a date was set, a date in the future, about a year out, to say, as of this date, everybody, you can't issue a cert that's signed with SHA-1 anymore. And that was still in the era of 3-year certs, right? It's actually 39 months, 3.25-year certs. And so what happened was there were certs that were issued the day before that due date that were 3 years plus in term. And so now, 4 years after the consensus had been achieved that this was an insecure algorithm, that encryption was still in the wild, in the field, on legitimate public certs that were not considered to be misissued.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's where they said, no, this is not okay. This is just
It's
not
not.
okay. Right.
It took far too long for us to move with those
Yeah.
cryptographic standards. The SHA-1 shorter is a great example. We've had things where we moved from 1K RSA to 2K RSA. We're going to have to probably make that stronger. We've got this wonderful post-quantum thing coming up. This is a security product, and maybe people forget that from time to time. We are fundamental to the internet and to a lot of modern life security protocol, and There's attacks all the time, there's faster computers all the time, there's better algorithms and research happening all the time, and we need to move with it. We need to keep up on modern cryptographic standards, and having 10-year, 15-year certificates, as you illustrated, Tim, it's just not a great thing to be out there when you're trying to be agile and keep these standards moving and keep everybody safe.
Absolutely correct. And then these last ones, kind of, we can lump them all together, which is to say that shorter certificates will enable and encourage the use of modern practices that are fundamentally better for uptime and more secure and generally have lower risk. And this is, at a basic level, we could call this certificate automation, right?
Yeah.
And encouraging the use of certificate automation has a lot of value in terms of stuff just running successfully.
Absolutely. I mean, we know with a lot of IT functions, automation is better. Building your machines, building your virtual machines, setting up desktops and laptops for employees, doing so many processes in an automated fashion is just better, and it frees up time for people to do other things that might need manual work. So it's definitely a best practice, and if nothing else, that would be a good point. But with all the others, there's there's some solid drivers for shorter lifetimes there.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of focus on delayed revocation events in the last year and a half in the WebPKI community, in the Bugzilla, and the CCADB community. And one of the things that's illustrated that's been very obvious to the browsers is that too many subscribers are incapable or claiming to be incapable of dealing with a fast certificate reissuance event. And sometimes fast certificate reissuance events are unavoidable, right? In the case of, like we talked about, a compromised key or a Heartbleed style 0-day or something along those lines. And this can happen, right? Or a mandatory revocation event when there's been some kind of technical glitch with certificates, and this can happen. Right now, there's a CA that's in the process of revoking 77 million misissued certs. So this can happen. And when it does, we all need to be able to deal. And so shorter certificate lifespans will get us to the point where we can deal. But right now, if lots and lots of enterprises don't adjust, they are going to have trouble dealing, right? So we want to talk about what we could do about that. I think my slide didn't build right, so forgive me for that. But what are the potential consequences when we move into a shorter lifespan cert? And this starts with the 6-month certs, gets worse with the 3-month certs, and then gets extra worse with the 1-month cert. The first one is just downtime from expired certs. Your certs expire and you don't get them changed, and you've got an outage, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We see these a lot as well, don't we? I mean, we say before, Tim, I think our marketing team have this nice big list, and this unfortunate running list of, real world outages of real world systems that people use daily and are often, countrywide or even global, caused by certificate expiries,
I don't think we
missed renewals and things.
I don't think we included that slide here, so shame on me. We should have, but if you look back just the last few years, there is a bunch of tech leaders born in the cloud, the people you would think would be best at this, major banks, major tech companies, people like, Microsoft and Nintendo and just major providers, Cisco, just
Starlink had one as well.
Spotify, Starlink, just have outages that we can trace back to certificate renewal errors, and those are the only ones we know about. There's lots of outages that go on where you don't know why it happened, and a bunch of those are surely certificate renewal errors as well. So this is a thing that plagues contemporary digital systems today, and it's only going to get worse. And then we talked about revocations, right? Sometimes certificates have to be revoked. And when those certificates have to be revoked, if you can't deal with it and you can't get and deploy a new certificate fast, like that day or in a couple days, you're going to have an outage.
Let's be clear on the revocations, Tim, as well,
Mhm.
because we do
Yeah,
talk about this. Is there's a number of reasons for a certificate to be revoked, right? So some of
sure.
them are simply that you, as a customer or a subscriber, may wish to revoke a certificate for whatever reasons. You've nuked a server, you've moved something around, you copied the private key somewhere it shouldn't be, and they're all fine. Many people can say you can self-revoke, and that's not a problem. It's a standard part of the life cycle process. But what we're often talking about with revocation here is things that are perhaps beyond the subscriber control, and in some cases beyond the CA control as well, right? So it's things like the certificate perhaps was called, the private key was compromised. So an admin accidentally copied the key somewhere, put it on GitHub, and it has to be revoked.
Yeah,
And you weren't necessarily planning for that. You weren't prepared to deal with the fact that your cert was instantly revoked, but you have to be able to deal with it. It could be that the certificate or the site, particularly in the case of code signing as an example, has been abused in some way. Perhaps it's signed
yeah,
some malware, perhaps it's involved in some kind of high profile cybercrime scheme, and it may need to be revoked. So there's other reasons beyond just you as the subscriber choosing to revoke a certificate, and I think that's important to bear in mind, that you need to be able to handle these revocations very, very quickly, even if you didn't necessarily initiate that revocation, which I think leads nicely into the last thing you have on this slide as well, which is
yeah.
misissuance.
Right, absolutely right. And sometimes this is a misissuance event by the CA. Like operating a CA is a lot like making complex software packages. And just the same way that software has bugs and it's unavoidable, and despite all our best intentions, there are bugs, misissuance is unavoidable. And despite all of our best intentions, misissuance occurs. And when it does, the CA has specific timelines they have to act on. And it will be either 24 hours or 124 hours based on the nature of the event. And at the end of that time, that cert's getting revoked whether you want it or not, whether you're ready or not. And so it's a good idea to be ready.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it is important to know about that
Yeah.
misissuance as well, Tim. Is again, the
Yeah.
same thing applies as I said about revocations, is those can often be, beyond direct control of anybody. I think there was a lot of misissuance. I mean, we've seen the examples you've just said. We've seen, accidents with CPS, we've seen procedural accidents and things like that. But we've also seen accidents that impact a lot of CAs that no one predicted. Like a certain
Right.
piece of software wasn't generating serial numbers with enough entropy, and millions of
Yes.
certs have to be revoked. Those certificates are
Right.
misissued. They don't have good enough serial numbers by the policies and the standard of the industry. No one was planning for that. No one was saying, "Oh, we'll put bad serial numbers in there," but it happened, and everybody needs to be able to adapt quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So how is your CA part of your preparedness in this scenario? Um, so I think it's important, first of all, to start to say, well, what are our criteria for, let's call it, a quality CA or a good CA? And we can run down this left to right. The first thing is compliance, right, Nick? There, like you were just talking about, there's very specific rules. Those rules are there for a reason. CAs don't have the liberty of saying, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore this rule in this case, right?
Exactly.
Every rule has to be applied every time consistently, or they're not rules.
We are a very well regulated industry, really. We have a set of
Yeah.
guidelines which we are expected to adhere to. We have
Mhm.
processes and ways we're supposed to issue certificates and things we are supposed to do. And, the CA you work with should be able to meet those obligations and meet those requirements. And quite honestly, they are a minimum standard. They are not
Yeah.
like a super high bar that you have to jump through hoops. And don't get us wrong. I mean, both you and I, Tim, will attest that operating a CA is, I believe, having done it for 20 something years, is a lot harder
Right.
than people might think from the outside in. But it is still ultimately a regulated industry where you just have to follow rules, you have to meet compliance. We're audited to that. We both know the
Right.
pains as well of having annual audits for things, and they go over millions of items of evidence and all of our processes, and they scrutinize every little thing to make sure that we are doing it right. Because obviously, we can say as a CA we're meeting these guidelines, but that has to be proven, and it can be proven technically in some ways, but it also has to be proven with these audits we have to go through. But it is very important that any CA you work with and any CA you choose given all of these changes and given all of the impacts that it can have to you that we just talked about, you really want your CA to be properly compliant, very, very involved in the industry, have all the right audits and all the right things, and keep up to date with that, and not just do, I got my web trust audit a couple of years ago and that's it. I don't need to put any more effort in. So it's a very critical thing for any CA you work with to have.
Yeah, agreed. The second bullet here, right? Security and incident management. One of the things to think about is we talked about these events, these revocation events, and things along those lines. You're better off if you have a CA that is aggressively and actively monitoring these things. So, by way of example, every time that a CA has an incident with their public facing SSL or SMIME certificates, they need to report it in this place called Bugzilla. It's an online forum that's operated by Mozilla. And CAs are expected to monitor every CA's reports, everything that occurs on Bugzilla, even if it's not for their CA, because there may be lessons learned, right? A CA may have made an error, and we might go look and say, oh, we're making the same error. Let's fix it. Or we're not safeguarding against this. This is a potential misissuance event, and we could put a software safeguard in place to prevent it. Let's put it in place before it happens. And that's the kind of thing that a good quality CA does. And what it does is it reduces your risk as a subscriber partnering with that CA. The third one is, the web PKI infrastructure. So we talk about the web PKI, which is to say the public certs that we all use, and the surrounding envelope of services and tech and stuff that keeps it all running. And all of that stuff needs to be made and maintained by the web PKI community, which basically is browsers and CAs. And we're talking about certificate transparency logs and linters and certificate monitoring engines. And all of this stuff has to be made by the CAs. And the CAs who are involved in making and maintaining it are going to be the CAs that use it correctly, are going to be the CAs
Yes.
that are not going to have a technical problem because they screwed it up, because
Yep.
they understand what these things are at the core. So if you look at it, if your CA is heavily involved in maintaining the infrastructure that runs the web PKI, that's encouraging.
I think it's important to note on that one, Tim, that a lot of those things you just talked about that are functions of the web PKI, you have the CAs, you have the browsers and the trust store operators, but there's a good number of things around there which they're not mandated, they're not required. They are things that are often voluntary done by the CA. So
Yeah,
take certificate
yeah,
transparency. A good number of CAs run certificate transparency logs. They don't have to. We
including
don't have
us.
to.
Yeah,
Exactly, including us.
yeah,
We don't have to. There's no requirement to do so, but we do so because we want that ecosystem to work, because
right.
it has to work. We understand
Yeah,
why it's there. It's to keep us all in check and it's to keep us all audited and provide that public record. But it isn't required for a CA to run CT. And then you mentioned things like linters and stuff. It isn't required for a CA to build their own linters and create them and open source them like we do, but it is required, arguably, that linters have to be used. So a CA could build their own linter and keep it and run it, or they could open source it. And again, a couple of CAs, ourselves included, will produce these tools, we maintain them, we update them for our own purposes, but we also release them to the world, which admittedly is probably a
yeah.
smaller niche of people that need them, but we release them open source and we maintain them so that all of the CAs can use them as well, and anybody else that's interested.
Yeah, yeah. And this needs to happen. If CAs don't do this, we all won't have certs, right? And then everything will really come crashing down. So, we just step up and do our part because we have to. And there's other CAs that do too.
Yes.
And then this last point is that not just like technically, like making the technical things, but thinking about it. Now, this is what we call intellectual leadership. Thinking about what should it be and how should our system work and how should our ecosystem run, and being a teacher and being a voice. And again, a CA who does this. So if you look at Sectigo, for example, we have 5 offices inside the CA browser forum. which is more than any other organization in history. We also have one of our members is the vice chair of the ETSI Commission that establishes the IDIS certificates. I myself am the vice chair of the CA Browser Forum. So we know what's going on. Like, we're not going to be surprised by the activities in the CA Browser Forum because we're watching them happen in real time, or we're actually shaping the policy. And that again is good for you because you've got a CA that's letting you know as soon as things are coming. You've got a CA that's got an action plan. You've got a CA that's helping you stay current every step of the way. And because we learn and understand you and your use cases and your needs, we're empowered with that. And when we go back to these discussions and ballots and rules for creation and all of that around the industry, we know through real world understanding that we are shaping policies that the subscriber community, that the enterprises of the world will be able to actually implement and use. And if your CA is out of touch, then that's a CA that can be surprised. That's a CA that will make errors because they don't understand what's happening and how things are supposed to work. And that's a CA that doesn't give you the heads up and the forward looking information to make sure that you can start now and be current.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. We think about it this way. So for us, there's 3 areas. We want to focus on technical leadership, which we talked about, intellectual leadership, we talked about, and then the last one is ethical leaderships. We think that a CA has obligations to the community to do something. You know, there's 6 billion internet users in the world, right? And we think that part of our deal where we're a public CA and we get to do this for a living is we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing for those 6 billion internet users. And that figures into our decision making as well. All right. So, but there's more than just certificates. There is also another set of benefits that the CA can give you, and this involves automation platforms. So, we can probably run down this list. We've talked about a lot of this: prevent outages and downtime, cut your operational costs, reduce your security, simplify your compliance, future-proof your business. All of this really comes by offering certificate management platforms and certificate automation capabilities that make your business more reliable, more efficient, more predictable, and more compliant. You want to add to that, Nick?
No, I think you make a good point there, Tim. A lot of it comes down to what we talked about a lot of times, which is management and automation, because these changes are happening, right? We talked about it right from the start, this 47-day change. There's a number of other changes as well. And as comparatively easy as it is for a CA to just kind of issue certificates and be done, and that's certainly a valuable thing, and it's certainly a valuable thing for many people. But all these things here are additional things that a good CA will provide to not just get you through all these changes that are coming up, which are sizable and a lot of people are going to struggle with, but also to get you through to the future, because the technology we provide, what we're talking about, PKI certificates, TLS and everything, it isn't going anywhere. It's not optional. It's not something you can choose to get out of. And so you need all of these things. You need management tools. You need automation. You need to reduce these risks that we've talked about before that you have from compromises or from downtime and expiries and things like that. So you need all of these things really to future-proof your business, and you need a CA that can provide these things, and perhaps isn't just one that says there's a certificate, there's a certificate, there's a certificate. It's much more than that, and that's what we're trying to get across here.
Yeah. So I think we've covered this. We've covered this. Let's move on. So, but it's all stuff we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
Another thing to be aware of is Nick mentioned early on that quantum computers are a real thing, and post-quantum cryptography is coming. And just in case that's a headline that any of us haven't heard, the very short story on that is that quantum computers are going to break RSA and ECC. And we're going to have to stop using RSA and ECC. They're not salvageable. And instead, we need a new set of algorithms we have to use instead. And these have different words, different names like MLChem and MLDSA. And these are the things we're going to use. And these are coming, and they're coming in the next few years. NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technologies, wants us to be deprecated from RSA and ECC by 2030 and entirely off them, completely purged by 2035. And so those are soon dates. Those are dates that are not super far away. And as a consequence, enterprises need to be preparing now for how to use that. So another great example of what you get when you have a technical and intellectual leader who's partnering with you as a CA is our PQC Labs capability. So we actually have something where any Sectigo enterprise customer can get private root post-quantum cryptography certificates from us today. Now they're private root, you can't use them in production, but you can use them and put them in your dev environment and start to work on what you're going to do and figure out what you need to do to become post-quantum ready. And we'll have a whole webinar on this process sometime in the next few months that I'll encourage you to join. But this is another capability that you get when you're working with a CA who's looking at the future, who is technically and intellectually committed to being a leader in this space.
Absolutely. It's going to be it's going to be an interesting one, this and everything. Like I say, we mentioned it before in terms of this being another good reason for the agility that we're pushing and the short lifetime, but it's certainly going to be a monumental change with everything, I would think, but certainly with what we do with PKI and certificates. But it's one of those things we've done a lot of talks on. I know you have, Tim, and it's kind of unpredictable, but you do want to work with a CA that is at least prepared for this. We call it quantum readiness because although, as you said, these certificates are private CA today, they can't practically work on people's browsers and cell phones and things like that. That doesn't mean, or that isn't an excuse not to start experimenting with this technology, not to start to think where it's going to fit in, how you're going to be able to adapt to it, where you're going to be able to put it in your infrastructure. And so you really want to work with a CA that is at least prepared for this and can at least change and adapt rapidly when these not standards, I know there's plenty of these NIST standards that have come out, but when something finally appears that is, a post-quantum version of the certificates we issue today, when all of that is ready and all the software and hardware supports it, you want a CA that's there, that's already given you the advantage, but is also prepared themselves. I think that's the key thing. It's being ready. It's definitely emphasis on the word readiness on this slide.
And a good example of that is, so in the CA browser forum, the CAB forum has already started work on ballots to standardize and allow post-quantum cryptography certificates in two of its working groups, the ones with signatures where it's more important, the code signing working group and the SMIME working group. Well, guess who the chairman of the code signing working group is? It's a member of the Sectigo compliance team. And guess who the vice chair of the SMIME security working group is? It's a member of the Sectigo compliance team. So again, we are right there on the cutting edge. Happens to be the same member. We are right there on the cutting edge in terms of knowing what's going on, and we're going to be there with you every step of the way, the whole way.
Absolutely.
Yep. So here's your checklist for success, right? And I think we've touched a lot of this, but let's just run down them real quick, right? Does your CA offer an integrated CLM platform to manage your certificates? Automation, platform-based management, complete integration between your CA and your CLM. These things are essential. You're not going to be ready for 47-7-day certs without it. Hold all of the industry certifications that you need. It's not just WebTrust, right? WebTrust, SOC, ISO, ETSI. There's a bunch of things that show that your CA is ready and secure and they're able to do it. Does the CA have those certifications? Is your CA proactive with you and with knowledge and with its approach to security and incident management? Is your CA teaching you and guiding you and offering you information that you need about the future? Is your CA a major contributor to the web PKI infrastructure? Is your CA going to be ready for you with post-quantum cryptography? That's the list of things that you want to look for from a CA if you want to make sure you're ready for the changes that are coming.
Absolutely. I think it's a good checklist. I think, there are a lot of CAs as well out there that can offer similar things to this, but there's also a lot that only do check a few on that list. And it's definitely something you should bear in mind to look at as we prepare. And certainly just a CA that just maybe issued certificates and didn't provide half of the things listed here, that may work in some cases, or may have worked for many years, but the changes that are coming up, and there's more beyond. We're just talking about in the 47 days here. We know there's more other changes and things we've talked about elsewhere, Tim. But it is, I think, really important to make sure that the CA you work with can check all, if not most, of these boxes in order to prepare you for all these changes and prepare you for the future and not have all of these horrible outages and other downtime that you might otherwise experience.
Yep, agreed. So we want to be that CA and we want to help you with that. One of the big things that we talk to our customers about a lot is how do I make my case for automation? I want to do automation. I'm as the person who's in charge of certificates, the director of IT or the sysadmin or the CIO. I know that this is important. But I have to secure budget and I have to get roadmap and I have to prioritize these things. How do I do this? So this is one of the kind of frameworks we offer. And we can actually give you tools where you can plug in your own numbers and come back with your own results to build your own RSI to go and secure that funding and that roadmap. But these are the kinds of things to think about. What's going to be benefited through automation? It's going to be the likelihood that certificates are deployed correctly. It's going to go up. Your staff op productivity is going to go up a lot. You're gonna have a lot of time saved to do other things. Your demonstrating compliance becomes much easier in an automated scenario, and you can proactively stay on top of address the needs and vulnerabilities that may occur in the industry. And all of this is just very enabled by automated CLM. And again, we have a tool that you can get from our website where you can go and you can plug your own numbers in and build your own use case, or build your own what do I want to say, justification, right? But this is an important kind of thing that you want to be able to do, and we can help you with that. So getting back to the step down, we said that by March 2026, you're going to get down to 100 or 200 day certs. So what do you want to do between now and then? This is our recommendation. Our recommendation is that starting really now, right now you're getting some information, but starting really now and by August, let's say July to August, you got to figure out what certs you have and where they are, so you know what you're going to have to deal with. And this is not necessarily as easy as it might sound. We run into people all the time who have rogue certificates inside their organizations, certs that they don't even know about. Somebody who is somewhere else in the company orders certs, puts them up, they're using them, and then they go off to do their own thing. And then a year later, those certs expire and you didn't know they existed, right? And you find out about them when something stops working. And we've all been there. We've all seen this happen. So that's a very real thing. It's a very real problem. We recommend that you get to understand your inventory first. Know where your certificates are. And then when you do that, you can start to understand what do you need to automate and what's the relative priority of these things and what needs to be first, what needs to be second, etc. This will give you by the winter, you need to be putting things in place, or by the winter, you need to be choosing solutions. And then in the spring, you need to be putting things in place, testing them, making sure they're working correctly, so that as much as possible, by March 15, this automation is actually running. Now, it doesn't have to be 100% coverage. If there's things where you don't have the automation up and running, you go to a 6-month cadence until you get them up and running. But if you've gotten a bunch of stuff automated, then you can handle the 6-month cadence on what's left because you already took a lot of work off your plate and you removed a lot of risk. And then those things that are on a 6-month cadence, you start working on them. And hopefully by a year later, most of them are automated, because then you're going to go to a 90-day cadence on what's left. And in that kind of time frame, you want most of your certs to be automated. And that's the basic idea. That's what we recommend you do here. But if you don't get started now, what you don't want to do is have your workload and your risk double in March and then sit down and scratch your head and say, gee, what am I going to do about this?
Yeah, I think that's the thing I said at the start, Tim, that it's
Yeah.
almost scary. You know, March
Yeah.
26th is not that far away, and if you take into account the Christmas period, the holiday period,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
couple of months around the end of the year when things tend to not be done as much, or there's freeze windows and things like that, you take that into consideration, it is not that many months away, and preparation needs to be made. And this timetable is as good as we can make it, and as sort of
Yeah.
as flexible as we can make it to give people an idea of what they should be doing over the next few months to start to prepare for this first step down.
Yep. Um, so what does this mean, like, pragmatically? Um, um, we talked about certificate discovery, right? So certificate, or we didn't talk. We talked about finding your certificates. So there are tools available that will help you discover your certificate. We'll call those certificate discovery tools. So a great place to start is find those certs. Run certificate discovery. Take the certs you know about. Get them all together in a single database, if you will, in a single repository of information, and make sure that you understand them by what's the environment, who's the owner, what's the use case, what's the level of risk. Um, think about how your actual policies and procedures are going to change and update when you're on a 6-month cadence instead of a 1-year cadence. Think about things like your workload flows, what are you doing for your compromised certs, um, and the certs owned by nobody problem, right? Where somebody leaves. One of the problems with 1-year certificates is it allows a long time for forgetting. Right? I deploy a cert and then I quit my job and nobody knows I'm playing the certs, and I don't bother telling anybody because I'm thinking about my new job instead of my old job. And 11 months pass and suddenly something breaks and nobody has any idea why. So you want to get rid of that kind of thing. And really an automated platform will do that. And an automated platform helps you with all these problems and is very much the right solution for this. Think about some of your options for automation. Acme is very, very popular, and that's one that probably everybody should at least look at. You got very good support for a lot of different server software options or hardware devices, and you can automatically deploy it through Acme. There's also, you can automatically renew through Acme. You can do DCV through Acme. There's a lot of power with Acme. There are other options. Maybe you're doing SCEP or EST, or maybe you need a RESTful API, and all of these things are also options to consider. There are agents. You can get agents to deploy on popular operating systems, and then the agent will connect to the CLM and it will do the installation for you. So there are a lot of options that are available that you can use for automation, and you should understand the full suite of them and make sure you're using it as much as you can somewhere or other.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about automation a lot whenever we do any kind of webinar, I think, Tim. So this is a good one to just stick in near the end, is to say,
Yep.
with everything we've talked about, the main thing you need to think about is automation, because whether it's 47 days, whether it's other forms of agility, whether it's these other changes that are coming up, and other changes that are going to happen in the future that we maybe can't prepare for, automation is the key to being able to ride them out. And
Yeah.
that needs to be something that's provided by your CA and your
Yeah.
CLM software. And these are kind of the best options to look at if that's something you're only just
Yeah.
started investigating, but hopefully it's something you've already considered before.
And no matter what you do, make sure you look into Acme, right?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
a lot for a lot of organizations, and Acme is going to take care of a lot of what you're looking for. Maybe not
It is.
100%, but it'll knock out a whole big swath of it.
And then, yeah, you can deal with
Yeah.
those last manual few if
Yeah.
you've got the
Yeah.
majority of it done with Acme.
Yeah. Or find another solution for those. You do those API based or something, right? But if you knock most of them out with Acme, that'll make your life much easier. And that's something to
Ab-
really consider.
Absolutely.
Just since we're at the end of it, let me quickly plug the Root Causes podcast. One of Nick's and my associates and I run a podcast where we talk about all things about PKI, digital certificates, stuff like we were talking about here. We're publishing multiple new episodes every week. We've just recently put up our 500th episode. And we would love to have you come join us and hundreds of thousands of other people who listen to the Root Causes podcast. And you can find them wherever you listen to podcasts. And with this, I think we are ready for questions.
Great. Two things from the questions that I've seen that I can answer. One is yes, we'll share the recording of the webinar afterwards.
Okay.
You'll have it in your inbox by tomorrow. And two, Tim, you mentioned an infographic about outages. It's a great overview, and we'll also share that in the follow-up email.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great point. Then the actual questions. I sometimes generate P12 certificates with private key to be installed for a cloud vendor, for example. How do we automate that since they do not give me a CSR?
That's a good question, that one. Thanks, Leah. So just for everybody's clarity, P12 is kind of an exported version of a certificate along with the private key. Now, I would say for TLS and for kind of websites and web services, I'd say that's not a particularly great practice, honestly. It's not something that vendors really should be doing. The risk of having that private key being copied around is quite dangerous. It could lead to compromise and all the bad things we've been talking about for the past 40, 50 minutes. What I would suggest in those cases is two things. Is number one, the vendor that's doing this is going to have to adapt to these new standards, right? Because these aren't optional. They don't get to opt out. They won't be able to find a CA that will be able to still give them 1-year certificates. So they are going to have to provide a way to automate this for you. And I think that is important to know with any questions that anybody listening to this might have with regards to their vendors and will my vendor do this? Will my vendor do that? Yes, your vendors are going to have to adapt to these changes. They are going to have to, make allowances and account for the need for automation and shorter certificates. And I think Tim's mentioned this before on another webinar we've talked about. You have some power there. You as a customer have the ability to tell that vendor, if you don't support certificate automation properly, I will go and find another vendor. And that's something we encourage people to do, is to make sure the vendors that you work with and that you pay know that you require things to help them with these change, and know that you will vote with your wallet and move elsewhere if they do not provide these services. But the final point I would make quickly on that P12 thing is that is generally a bad practice. And I would encourage you to speak to the vendor and tell them to not do that, because it's highly dangerous and certainly something we wouldn't recommend.
Thanks, Nick. Can DCV be automated?
Yes, that's a fairly easy one to answer. The answer to that one is yes, absolutely. We at Sectigo have kind of an agent piece of software in our certificate management platform, SCM, which can hook into your DNS provider and automate that for you. But in general, yes, it is very automatable. The DCV process is inherently tied to your DNS provider and your domain names. And I would say today, the vast majority of DNS providers will provide APIs or some kind of interface that allows you to automate the creation of DNS records, which is ultimately what DCV is. So yeah, it is absolutely automatable. There are a number of solutions out there. We certainly have them. And if you're one of our customers or thinking about it, please speak to your account rep or speak to someone in sales and they'll guide you through that. But yes, it is definitely an automatable process and should be.
Thank you. With the current changes in the security landscape, what skills do you see as essential for security analysts or engineers today?
Automation. Automation. So it's not just this. I mean, we talked about automation with regards to certificates, but this is a best practice everywhere. People doing things manually, sitting at a keyboard with a mouse, poking at buttons is just, it's horribly inefficient and it's horribly risk prone. And people are not good at doing the same thing consistently 100 times in a row. We're just not good at that. And software is very, very good at that. So to the degree that we can build systems where we can rely on the software to do the right thing over and over and over again, that increases our security posture, it increases our efficiency, It's more predictable. We have better uptime. It's much easier to map to a compliance platform. Governance becomes easier. You can have automated governance and rules, all of this stuff. And there is just, it's boundless opportunity throughout the world of IT and throughout your career, that the more you can make the computers work for you, the better your future will be and your career prospects will be. I believe that just so wholeheartedly.
I couldn't I couldn't agree more with you, Tim. Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
Great. The next one is there a need for CAA records moving forward?
Yes, is the answer to that one. So CAA records are certificate authority certificate authority authorization. It's a type of DNS record that allows you, as the owner of a domain name, to basically control which CAs can issue certificates for that domain. So you could put a CAA record in that says sectigo.com, and only sectigo.com would be allowed to issue certificates for your domain. It has another few features as well, things like account control, and there's one or two other clever things, and things being added to it all the time. But yes, it is
Right.
absolutely still relevant. It's still required to be supported by all CAs. A lot of, as I said, there are newer features that are being added to it in support of automation, like account identifiers. So yes, it absolutely still works. It absolutely has relevance, and you should absolutely use CA records if you're comfortable with it. They are optional. You don't
Yeah.
have to have them, but they are a great control if you wish to or know how
Yeah.
to support them.
Yeah. CAA records potentially give you much more control about what's going on. You can set a set of CAs that you're comfortable relying on for certificates, and then other ones that maybe you're not comfortable relying on just don't enter into the picture. So, in that regard, they're very valuable. They're also valuable because it can help you discover the certs, these rogue certs that we talked about. If somebody goes out to, you know, CA XYZ and tries to get a cert and they can't, and they come whining to you about the fact they can't get a cert, now you know that they're out ordering certs and you can take over those certs. And so people use CAA records effectively in that way as well, to knock out a large swath of rogue certificates that they don't want in their operation. And then, like Mick mentioned, there's other bits of control that are in there. Like you can decide whether or not you're willing to have wildcards, right? And all of that becomes available to you if you want to.
Thank you. Are 47-day certificates already available in Sectigo Certificate Manager, or do we have to wait for the CAP forum date?
You could get them today, absolutely. We have long since supported shorter lifetime certificates for anybody that wants them. And yes, they're absolutely available today. If you're an existing customer, there's multiple ways to enable this depending on which platform you use, but the majority of listeners, I think, will be enterprise customers with SCM. And you can absolutely contact our support if you don't have it, but we can enable a 47-day template. We can go less. We have some customers that are looking at kind of 7 and 10 days, some that are looking at 90. I would encourage anybody that's curious or wants to try it, please do so. Please reach out to support and you will be able to. It won't stop you from getting 1 year certificates today. So let's be clear on that. You'll still be able to continue with your processes, but we can provide short lifetime certs today. And I would encourage anybody that's thinking about it or perhaps on the fence, contact our support. We'll get you enabled with it and you can start working with short lifetime certs today. No need to wait for CAB forum deadlines.
Yeah. And this is a great way to convince yourself that everything's running correctly, right? You knock yourselves down to short lifetime certs. And if you start running into hiccups somewhere, take that back to the long-term certs while you get that problem fixed, go down to the short lifetime certs again, and basically you have this scream test. And that definitely is something that is a practice. We have a lot of customers do that with a variety of things, and you could do that here.
Absolutely.
Great. So we're coming up to the hour. I think we've answered most questions. If we haven't, then some of them were really specific to your setup. So we'll come back to you directly. But for now, thank you everyone for your many great questions and your time. And thanks, Nick and Tim. If you have any more questions, do get in touch with us directly. And we also have another webinar coming up in July where we are shining the spotlight on getting your business quantum ready with 47-day certificates. It's already on the website, so you can sign up. We'd love to see you there. But for now, thank you and wishing you a good rest of your day.